The Shortland is an 11-metre steel-hulled, diesel-powered launch which for 22 years served the MSB for depth sounding and surveying the harbour floor. It was headed for the scrapyard when the Coastal Patrol stepped in. Volunteers will begin converting the vessel on its arrival at the Lake Macquarie base this weekend. Along with a paint job, it will need new marine radios, crew quarters, first aid and stretcher stations.
The patrol can make good use of a vessel such as this one, mainly for, say, secondary response work on the lake for rescues. It's a little bit too slow for primary response, but certainly backup would be ideal. Also, it would make a good platform for disasters. Hopefully we don't ever have any, where we can bring the patient casualties on board and triage them out to the other boats.
The Shortland will become the flagship of the Volunteer Coastal Patrol's expanding fleet and will be used only on the lake. It's considered ideal for towing stranded vessels off shifting sandbars, as well as a practical training platform for safe boating techniques. The Shortland will also be a backup for the lake's ageing police boat fleet.
I believe we are seeing the government's recognition of voluntary organisations such as the Royal Volunteer Coastal Patrol and the Coast Guard. Within New South Wales, for a long time we've been left to our own devices and making ends meet's a little bit hard, so hopefully this is an escalation in the government's activities and our involvement.
Unions whose hunter members are in the firing line view the Griner cuts as vicious.
I think Mr Griner's pain is more like a major operation.
The government's planned job and spending cuts are expected to particularly hit health, education and transport services. But Richard Firewood, the acting general manager of Newcastle Buses, says any cuts would be in line with ongoing rationalisation plans.
The announcement by the Premier yesterday really reflects part of a total reform package that we presented to the union late last month as a far-reaching new direction for bus employees. Part of that is part-time employment, an initiative which we think will be well received in the industry.
Faye Hitchcock from the Tramway and Omnibus Employees Association says the package means that in Newcastle 100 jobs will be lost and services cut, and she asserts her members are furious.
This is just another blow. This is an ongoing campaign by State Transit. They don't inform their workers, they just lay it on the table and we're expected to take it.
Colin Cowell, the Newcastle General Manager of City Rail, says the latest announcement comes as no surprise because the organisation has planned for change. But Kevin Fordham, the Newcastle organiser of the Australian Railways Union, says the Griner cuts will take away thousands of jobs from this region.
Anything up to 3,000.
Despite the Griner government's assurance of only voluntary redundancies in the public sector, Mr Fordham believes sackings are now a possibility.
If they pursue it this way, then we think that their next option will be that enforced redundancies will be a fact of life.
The Newcastle Trades Hall Council's Peter Barrick says the uncertainty in the Hunter is being created by the lack of details about the cuts. Mr Barrick says how the unions will react to the massive cuts will be clearer after a State Labor Council meeting in Sydney tomorrow and talks in the Hunter early next week. Scott Bevan, NBN News.
Impact. It's what Richard Ramey is all about and exactly what he's made on the South East Australian Basketball League. The competition's most prolific scorer is averaging 45 points a game and laying on a heap more for his young teammates.
We're getting a lot better. Now when I get double and triple team, they are moving, without the ball. So now I can hit the open man. It's just a matter of them putting it in the hole.
Newcastle fans will find out just how good Ramey really is when he lines up against former Kings star Steve Carfino on Saturday night. The man they call Mr Magic is on the comeback trail after recovering from a back injury that threatened his career. Ramey has heard plenty about the Carfino Magic and is looking forward to a toe-to-toe confrontation.
I think it's going to be a pretty good matchup. I talked to Steve when I was in Sydney at Dwayne McLean's place on Sunday night, so we're looking forward to the showdown.
The Comets also have plenty of muscle power under the basket courtesy of Big Mark Ridlin, and the clash with the Hunters promises to be one of the most entertaining of the year. Bruce Mackenzie, NBN News.
Mr Brooke has spent nearly 18 months working on the initiative aimed at what he called a new beginning for Ulster's politics. Today, in less than half an hour, he told the party leaders it was at an end. They went to the Commons to hear the official statement.
While I am naturally disappointed at this moment that the current process has to end, foundations have been laid for progress in the future, which neither cynics nor the men of violence will be able to undermine.
Ulster Unionist leader Jim Molyneux praised Mr Brooke for maintaining the confidence of the parties, but the DUP leader warned that any future talks would depend on a full suspension of the Anglo-Irish Conference.
The next time that Unionists would be prepared to talk, it would have to be on the foundation that nothing would reimpose the Anglo-Irish Conference until the talks were concluded. And we'd hope by that time we'd have gained what we set out to do, get a replacement for and an alternative to the agreement.
I'm not interested in apportioning blame. I mean, Northern Ireland politics has been about that for far too long. It's been about trading, name-calling and point scoring. It makes no contribution to resolving the problem. I want to see the day when all of our people will agree as to how we're going to share that little piece of earth together.
For 20 years, politicians have tried and failed to get a political agreement in Northern Ireland. 9 Secretaries of State have searched for a solution since 1972 when Stormont was dissolved. Amongst them, Willie Whitelaw, who set up a power-sharing executive. Labour's Merlin Rees quickly found himself in the middle of a unionist strike which brought down the executive. Jim Pryor developed a system of rolling devolution, but the SDLP boycotted it. And Douglas Hurd concentrated on talks with the Irish government, which resulted in the Anglo-Irish Agreement of 1985. And it was a confirmation from Prime Ministers Major and Haughey that the Anglo-Irish Conference would meet this month, which proved one strain too many for the initiative. The Unionists unwilling to talk while the conference is in session.
Gang shows have been part of scouting since the 30s, but productions such as this one are a far cry from earlier campfire skits. A cast of 75, along with an army of workers backstage, bring alive elaborate costumes, scenery, makeup and lighting. The stage becomes a jungle. And then a cemetery with witches, ghosts, zombies and a few little devils. There are rockers and bobby soxers. Others have overcome stage fright to be billy cans. There's also a tribute to scouting's long-suffering sleeping bags. Blowflies get in on the act for a performance that went without a hitch. Well, almost. The cast will be answering their curtain calls for the next 2 days.
Number 6 pump house is a major link in the domestic and light industrial sewerage system in the Wickham area. Water Board employees believe several hundred litres of petrol may be in the pump house trap, and they're investigating a possible leak from a neighbouring service station. Fire brigade officers pumped foam into the sewerage system to isolate the petrol fumes from the air. A Water Board spokesman said there appeared to be no immediate danger.
The fire brigade are a little bit concerned, but it's not bad enough to cordon off the area or anything.
The pumping station has been shut down while Water Board employees take samples and use gas detection equipment to trace the leak.
The sewage will back up, but it won't back up that fast. It won't affect the residents.
It's expected that the Water Board will be on the scene well into the night. An oil company expert is also on the way from Sydney to investigate the leak.
It was a jubilant Tony Kemp who flew back into Newcastle tonight. A sterling performance marking King Wally rates as the pinnacle of his checkered career.
You know, one of the highlights of my career has been Australia. It's been a goal for ever since I've been in the New Zealand team, and having beaten them by 24 points to 8 is quite unbelievable. Really, it just hasn't sunk in quite properly yet.
But if all is happy in the Kemp camp, the same can't be said for the Newcastle Knights.
It is a pretty big shock to me. Both Allens walking out on the club, it sort of left me a bit disheartened as well. But first things first is we've got Brisbane tomorrow night, and hopefully we can get the 2 points.
Inspired by the exploits of the Graphs and Sticks at Wimbledon, aspiring champions have taken to the district park courts with the ambition of one day taking on the best in the world. Traditionally, the country areas of Australia have provided some of the nation's greatest tennis players, Rod Laver, Margaret Court and Yvonne Goolagong-Cawley, to name a few. For the organisers, the response to the event is tremendous.
We've got over 290 players here, and they're representing all the major country centres of New South Wales.
Of course, split into 2 divisions, junior and senior.
Yeah, the juniors, which started today, go till Thursday, and then the seniors start Friday, and it culminates with finals day here on Sunday with the seniors.
Newcastle should do well with Willie O'Neill, Richard Nichols and Brian Williams expected to fight out the Open men's event, with Stockton's Emily Fisher a firm favourite for the ladies' title.
Trade and regional security were the main points of his address to an assembly of Newcastle Rotary, the Businessmen's Club and the Australian American Association. Inevitably, discussion included the 100,000-tonne subsidised wheat sale by the United States to Kuwait, which has even become the subject of correspondence directly between Prime Minister Hawke and President Bush. But Mr Sembler says Australia should have no complaint.
We've not been in that market. You basically abandoned that market, although there's still room in that market if Australia wants to sell into that market. But our bid was basically against the European community, as it always has been designed for.
On the subject of world security, Mr Sembler said great changes have occurred in East-West relations, which has meant that regional matters are now seen as more important. The ambassador said Allied cooperation during the Gulf War has shown that our countries can count on each other.
Regional conflicts are going to be where the problems are going to be in the future. We no longer have this bipolar world that we've had for the last 40-some years. Now it's going to be regional issues. And we see things going on in Yugoslavia. We see things going on in the Middle East. We see things that possibly could be happening in the Pacific. So we're all concerned about security, and we must continue to be concerned about security.
Appropriately, Newcastle's newest tourist attraction, the South Stein, was the venue for the launch of Tourism Week by the Mayor of Lake Macquarie, Ivan Welsh. Newcastle and Lake Macquarie have joined forces on the tourism front to capitalise on the proximity of the lake to the beaches and the harbour foreshore. Between them, the two city areas generated $120 million in tourist spending last year. It's hoped that targeting the convention business will boost that considerably.
That doesn't mean that we ignore the day trippers. We still do a promotion in that market, but we are strongest in comparison with our competitors if we concentrate on that meeting industry market.
There was another announcement today. Following the demise of the Hunter Manning Tourist Authority, the New South Wales Tourism Commission will re-establish an office in Newcastle to cover the Hunter and the Central Coast.
Newcastle holds up when you look at the areas around it which have an appeal, they have an identity, such as Port Stephens, Lake Macquarie and particularly the Cessnock Vineyard areas. Newcastle holds up fairly well, and there are opportunities there that the others don't have. That is to use the facilities here and extend out into those other areas that have a little bit more appeal at the present time.
The North Wing building was designed in the Federation-free style by New South Wales Government architect G.M. McRae and completed in 1917. It's listed under the Heritage Act. After it was damaged by the earthquake, the Hunter Area Health Service commissioned a conservation plan and feasibility study.
It shows that the building can be repaired for something in excess of $4 million. It can't be returned to health use, because that would cost in excess of $12 million. But it can be turned to other purposes.
According to the report, the north wing of the hospital could be used in a number of ways, as either a hotel, office space, accommodation for students, or housing for the elderly.
We're putting it up for expressions of interest in major agencies or groups to acquire and develop. We would continue to use the Nixon wing, the McCaffrey wing and the Madison building for between 10 and 20 years. It might be that if a major developer wishes to acquire the whole of the site, and we would lease back the 3 buildings from him.
The draft feasibility study says the North Wing isn't a prime example of the Federation-free style. It also states that it's of questionable financial value to retain the building, given its poor condition and the cost of repairs. The Hunter Area Health Service is applying for a demolition order because this could make the purchase more attractive to a developer. Margaret Henry from the Newcastle Greens would like the building retained.
It's seen people born here, die here, get well here. If it goes, people will grieve about its passing and will be left probably for years with a bleak, windswept car park like this instead of a building that could be useful to the city.
Last week, the Water Board attended a meeting of the unconvinced Newcastle City Council to explain its proposal to pump sewage sludge into disused mine shafts in Merewether. Today it was the local state members of Parliament's turn, with the member for Newcastle, Bryce Gaudry, and Waratah MLA John Price attending. The Deputy Managing Director of the Water Board, Peter Michel, said the aim of the briefing was not to win over the politicians, but to keep them informed.
It's particularly important that we get the local member involved and also any other members of Parliament whose constituents were affected by the Burwood Beach catchment area.
John Price, who is also the chairman of the reformed Hunter Labor Members Task Force, said after the meeting that he heard no information that horrified him and the scheme made practical sense. But after protests by Merewether residents and opposition by the City Council to the scheme, Mr Gaudry said he remains sceptical.
Well, I have been opposed to the sludge proposal for mine disposal under Burwood. I took that position at the public meeting. I haven't changed my position on that. I'm still taking representations from members of the public, and I will flow those on to the Water Board.
About 60 youngsters have enrolled in the week-long coaching camp. For most, it's a chance to hone their skills in a relaxed, fun-filled atmosphere. But for these under 15 players, it's serious business. They've been targeted by the Australian Institute of Sport as potential World Youth Cup players and will be under the microscope all week.
Speed tests, endurance tests, jump tests, and then we look at their skill work so that we've got an all-round athlete. We're identifying them in 1991. Some of these lads hopefully will go to the Institute of Sport in 1992 and from there on to the Australian team in 1995.
Also trying to make ball meet net were these young snooker enthusiasts. The Academy of Sport coaching course is aimed at driving home the principles of correct technique, something State Coaching Director Neville Hugel believes has been neglected for too long.
We unfortunately have had the least coached sport of all up till recently, and it's been my intention to change that here, particularly in New South Wales.
And at Waratah High School, some judo juveniles got the chance to hit the mat with one of Australia's greats. Warren Rosser has represented his country at Commonwealth and Olympic level and was once ranked 5th in the world. He'll be keeping 30 of the region's keenest competitors tossing and turning for the rest of the week.
A distinctly Greek theme launched the Yves Saint Laurent collection with athletic models sporting toga-style bathrobes. Bright flowing silks and delicate gold thread jackets followed, harem pants for men making a comeback. For those with more conservative tastes, similar caftans in blue and white. But at last, the traditional three-piece suit, slim-cut linen with a cheeky dash of colour at the collar. Issei Miyake made a return to basic black with serene shades of grey woven from wood fibres. Suits with sleeves, some without, and some, well, in between. Comme des Garçons found inspiration in the materials and styles of Mexico and Africa. Traditional fabrics blended with linen and polyester for truly ethnic overtones.
The clock tower mounted on the Hamilton Municipal Building is a suburban landmark. Badly damaged in the 1989 earthquake, it had to be demolished, robbing Hamilton of part of its heritage. 18 months later, a new $1.2 million building has replaced it.
This building today can serve as a memorial to the people of Newcastle in general, and Beaumont Street in particular, to remind us all of their determination, fortitude and courage, their high morale, and their fierce protection of their self-respect.
Lady Martin, the widow of the former Governor Sir David Martin, opened the building, watched by local identities including a former mayoress of the suburb, 95-year-old Mrs Olive Skelton. There is renewed confidence in Hamilton as businesses slowly return to their pre-quake status.
Things are starting to fall into place now. Just alone, we have something like 23 new shops opening between now and Christmas.
The Hamilton Chamber of Commerce says the area must concentrate on its specialty shops such as delis and restaurants to compete with the major shopping complexes. Peter Ryan, NBN News.